Today is going to be a fun day. We'll be talking about suppressor ownership, dispelling some of the myths surrounding suppressors, what they actually do versus what people say they do, as well as going over kind of an overview on how to purchase them and some of the possible uses for them. Whether or not they make sense for you, only you know that, but I think this will be a fun video, so I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do find the information useful, please consider subscribing and liking the video. Enjoy. Hey folks, I'm Nick with Archetype of Man. Today we're going to be going over common suppressor misconceptions, as well as some considerations before you get into the world of suppressors, what they do, what they don't do, and some myths surrounding ownership and the process of purchasing a suppressor. So I've got two out here today. I have the Griffin Armament Paladin 5, which we'll be using on a 5.56 and a 22 long rifle. And I have my Silencer Co. Omega 9K, which we'll be using on pistols, 9mm today. Now that suppressor also works well on my Henry Model X 357 rifle, especially when using 38 specials. However, did not bring that rifle today. There will be a card up there if you want to see that in action. So what is a suppressor or silencer? We'll go ahead and discuss those two terms. Silencer is what these were originally called back when Maxim designed them, around the same time that he came up with the design for the muffler on automobiles. So some people will get a bit pedantic about that. It's a suppressor, not a silencer. It's either one at this point. Does it truly silence a gunshot? No. I think most people have been able to figure that out. But it does suppress the noise by a good bit. There are three sources of noise when firing a gun. It does not matter if it is a rifle, pistol, etc. You have the detonation of the powder itself, the explosion, the expanding gases. That is what the suppressor helps with. It captures those gases as they exit the muzzle and gives them room to expand and dissipate a bit before exiting the suppressor. The other two sources of noise are the action itself. This is a semi-automatic. When you pull the trigger, the gun's going to make some noise cycling the action a lot faster than that. Suppressor doesn't really do anything there. It might make it a little better or a little worse, but negligible. The other source of noise is the projectile traveling through the air. Supersonic rounds, like you would commonly find in 5.56 or 223, break the sound barrier, which, utilizing the same mechanics that gives you a sonic boom when a jet flies at supersonic speeds, creates a crack in the noise. The suppressor doesn't do anything there. Now, people do often use subsonic ammunition that's not going to generate that supersonic crack to help. You're already trying to make it a little bit quieter here, so subsonic ammo helps a little bit there. And we're going to test that too as we get to the shooting part of this. But for some calibers, finding subsonic 223 is just not super viable. By the time you do get a subsonic 223 round, you've given up a lot of energy, and at that point, you're probably better off with something else. As far as the design of the suppressors themselves, they're typically a cylindrical shape. There may be some that are more squared off, but they're a housing that has a series of baffles inside of there, and those baffles give the expanding gas a place to go other than just poof at the muzzle. As we'll see here, even with 22, none of this is truly silent, but it can make a big difference for certain applications. So we have an AR-15, we have a magazine of 5.56. We're going to shoot a couple rounds here into the berm down there, unsuppressed, and I can't let you see me putting the suppressor on because YouTube doesn't like that. So you'll have to enjoy the nice little break there. But we'll go ahead and give it a go. That was kind of noisy. We are clear. And now a word from our sponsors. And a word from our sponsors, Epic Water Filters, located in Boulder, Colorado. These are one of my all-time favorite products that I've ever had on the channel. So I will link to the full review on these, but basically you get the indestructible nature of a Nalgene bottle with Epic water filters, awesome technology that allows me to drink water from any freshwater source. They have the Anywhere filter, which is what I use in here. They also have the Any Tap filter for using treated water sources such as taps or even bottled water if you're skeptical of the source. Very convenient, easy markings on the side. This is the OG Grande 48 ounce Nalgene. I drink a few of these a day, and I've been very impressed with their product. A huge thank you to them for supporting the channel. Link will be in the description for where you can order yours today. All right, we're back. I have the Griffin Armament Paladin 5 on there. The microphone for the sound is here, so you're not getting the sound at the camera. You're getting it at an approximation of what I get here on my end. So we'll give this a go. All right, I don't know if you could hear a difference. I could. Now I wanted to start with 5.56 or 2.23 to illustrate something. Those rounds are still generating a supersonic crack. If you've noticed me being a bit shy up near here, that's because this is hot even after just those few rounds. So does it make a difference? Absolutely. How much of a difference? Well, not as much as the next thing we're going to test. So the AR-15 is an extremely popular choice for defensive applications, and that's part of why I wanted to go ahead and start here. Inside of a structure, shooting one of these is not fun. If you've ever done that, then you already know, but they're very loud. This does help. However, I wouldn't come out here and shoot without ear protection. If I was ever unfortunate enough to have to use this inside my home, while the suppressor may take a lot of the blast out of it, it's still going to be really loud. This is my Ruger 1022 Charger. This is a pistol. It has a little folding brace adapter, very compact, and essentially scaled down 1022, but in pistol form. Uses the same magazines. I've got the 10 rounder here with me today, not the 25 rounder, but it's a 22. This is where suppressors start to be more fun, or you may notice a bigger difference. So let's go out here and shoot a few of these. All right, well, it would appear that I let the red dot die and left it on. So we shooting into the berm. We're not going for accuracy today. Some of you are gonna be like, yeah, well, it wouldn't matter anyway, right? But anyway, just listen. These are just regular bulk Federal 22 rounds. All right, we are empty. That was, you know, you wouldn't want to do it all day without ear pro, but it wasn't terrible, right? Now this same ammunition, we've just put the Griffin Armament Paladin 5 back on there. So same ammo. Now this is quiet enough to forego the ear protection. All right, we are clear. Now let me grab some subsonic 22. Now we are using some CCI quiets. These are subsonic rounds. They're not generating nearly as much energy, so the chances of them cycling the action on this semi-auto, probably not gonna happen. I'll have to manually cycle them. That being said, they're much quieter. Well, even manually cycling it. There we go, we're still good. And we got a steel impact with with a red dot that's off. Hopefully the camera's picking up just how quiet that is. And another impact. And we got one more. All right, so we're clear now. That is about as close to silent as you're gonna get using a suppressor. Now, inevitably, somebody's going to say that's why they're restricted, because they can be that quiet. They can only be that quiet with an extremely weak caliber by comparison. And even within that weak caliber, a significantly weakened loading that gets the round subsonic. Is that to say it's useless? No. This setup has harvested many squirrels legally and is great because I don't have to wear ear protection. I can listen for the squirrels. I can have my kids with me without them having to, what'd you say? Over the muffs. And something like this is very non-intimidating to teach a new shooter on. Now, I typically would use those rounds with the suppressor on a bolt action as opposed to this, but it'll work here, and this is fun. I just didn't realize the red dot was dead today. So you end up with a very quiet, even with the supersonic rounds, it's still quiet enough for small game hunting and stuff. It reduces noise pollution. So now let's talk pistols. This is a CZ P01. This happens to be the urban gray variant, but it is a 9mm. So we just have some regular 9mm target ammo here. We're gonna shoot in the dirt, 5-6 rounds, and let you get an ear for what that sounds like unsuppressed. All right, we'll go ahead and make it clear. All right, now we have the Silencer Co. Omega 9K on here, and we're gonna do another 5 or 6 here and let you hear same ammunition, what that sounds like. And here's one of the not so fun parts about shooting pistols suppressed. Sometimes it can affect reliability. All right, did it make a difference? I think it did. So this pistol is clear, but one thing to consider before suppressing a handgun, and of course the one I was using for this is not a tilt barrel design, but a lot of semi-automatics have a tilt barrel design that was invented by John Moses Browning. And typically what would happen is as the slide, comes to the rear under recoil from firing a round, the barrel will tilt up a little bit like so and unlock. What that means is with the extra weight of the suppressor, sometimes it can keep that from happening, which would impact the reliability a great deal. So when you're running the suppressor on a handgun, I'll go ahead and take that off camera just so we don't run afoul. So what the booster does, and here's the suppressor body itself, and here's the booster or piston assembly. This is what mounts to the gun barrel, and then this goes in and affixes to the suppressor. So it has a spring, and at the moment of firing it compresses and temporarily relieves the weight of the suppressor off the barrel of the gun, therefore allowing it to function as intended. So that is something to consider on your pistols. The CZ P01 is not a tilt barrel design, so I actually had a fixed barrel spacer that is in there currently, and that keeps there from being any chance of misalignment, baffle strikes, things like that. So will it work on a handgun? Sure, but as you noticed, it was not silent, and that was using 147 grain ammunition. So in a nutshell, that's how that works. Yes, there are rimfire suppressors for things like 22 long rifle that you could put on 22 long rifle handguns, and even using subsonic ammo, you'll probably have to manually cycle them. Yes, you can get them very quiet with certain calibers, namely 22 long rifle. But as you can see, the name silencer is a bit of a misnomer, which I typically don't care about because that's the original name that Maxim assigned to his invention, until well-meaning but ignorant people start taking that term and using it as grounds to restrict them even further. As far as purchasing a suppressor, you have the cost of the suppressor itself. Now, some people will say, hey, do you have a class 3 license for that? That's not how this works. Each individual suppressor gets a tax stamp. The tax stamp is $200 in addition to the cost of the suppressor. The $200 is paid to the government, not the suppressor manufacturer, not the store where you bought it. It goes to the government. In addition to that, you have to submit a Form 4. This can be submitted on behalf of yourself as an individual or on behalf of a trust that would need to be set up before you send the application in. Wait times have traditionally been long, although they are supposedly shorter now. They were not when I got mine. Actually, I was at, I think, 18 months on one and 16 months on another one, and ended up getting my congressman involved, signed a bunch of release documents to him so he could communicate with the ATF and FBI, and lo and behold, a week later, my tax stamp showed up. So it is a bit of a waiting game for government to do its government thing and go through these. You have to submit fingerprints along with your Form 4. Fortunately, it's gotten a lot easier to do all of this in addition to submitting a picture as well. In shops that have the silencer shop kiosk, you can actually do your fingerprints there on the machine, and they will be digitally submitted, as well as taking a picture even. That is the route I took for my suppressors, and it was very pain-free, that part of it. The waiting did suck a bit, but I think that's more of a testament to government as opposed to anything else. Rules with the suppressor. So you want to put one on your home defense gun, and you filed as an individual, and you're gone, and your wife grabs said home defense gun and uses it. That is a prime reason why doing this as a trust as opposed to an individual, and making sure that your wife is on the trust might be a really good idea. In terms of which suppressor to look at, this one is a 9mm suppressor. Check the manufacturer's site. You can find multi-purpose suppressors that'll do everything they claim, but then they may not do specific things as well as a dedicated suppressor. So for instance, this is a 9mm suppressor. It will work with 300 blackout subs, which I use my Ruger American Ranch 300 blackout. I hunted with this suppressor, which is part of why it's all dinged up, on there with 300 blackout subs, and it does make it quieter. Does it work as well as a dedicated 30 caliber suppressor? No. However, I had one tax stamp, and I can use this on my 9mm. I can use it on that 300 blackout. I can even use it on my lever action 357. So the trick is getting your bases covered. If you're trying to do it as inexpensively as possible, getting your bases covered without really sacrificing performance. Now, this Griffin Armament Paladin 5 is a fantastic suppressor. This thing is rated all the way up to 22-250. I don't even own a 22-250, but it can take the pressure. So on 5.56, it's actually a really good suppressor in my experience. It's got great tone, which is just the sound that it does emit. It's not too tinny. It's been a great 5.56 suppressor. I've used it on not just my AR, but also my bolt action 5.56. When it comes to using it on 22 long rifle, it will work, obviously. The issue is that this is a heavy suppressor because it has to be to deal with the pressures of 22, 250, 5.56, things like that. So on a lightweight 22 gun, you're adding a good bit of weight, and more weight than you would need with a dedicated 22 suppressor. That being said, I can use this on my 22s and still use it on my AR, and I have multiple things, applications for this one suppressor. Now, I will say, if you're going to go that route, and I think it's a perfectly fine and valid route to go, make sure you get a user serviceable suppressor. So this Omega 9K is welded. It cannot be opened to be cleaned. This Paladin 5 suppressor is not, and I didn't bring the tool with me, but this end cap ratchets off, and then there's an attachment that I use on a drill that goes through and pushes the baffles out so you can clean it. I think that's important, especially if you're going to be shooting rimfire, which is typically dirtier, through your 5.56 suppressor, because all the lead and things like that will accumulate, and 5.56 is pretty much jacketed projectiles, whereas 22 is copper plated at best. So you can end up with lead buildup, and your suppressor can end up gaining several ounces of carbon and lead buildup. So if you're going to go that route, I would advise you to get a user serviceable suppressor. There's not that many in 5.56. This is a good one. I'm not saying it's the only one, but there we are. One of the other things I want to stress is, once you buy a suppressor, it's not like trying an Xbox and deciding you want a PlayStation instead. It's a bit more restrictive on buying and selling these, if you hadn't figured that out yet. I've not had to sell any of my suppressors because I hyperfixate and obsess before I ever get them, and I've decided that's going to be a good fit. I would urge you to maybe not go as far as I go with that, but definitely put in your due diligence and make sure that's the one you want. Now, once you submit your Form 4 and it comes back approved, your tax stamp's paid, that's it. Keep possession of it. There's no having to update your thing unless you move. You would need to update your address of record, but there's no having to go in there and update your fingerprints or whatnot. You have that for life. There's some things to think about, whether it's, being my age and trying to plan for unforeseen events, or maybe getting on in years and trying to plan for the inevitable. You cannot just will these to somebody. This is where the trust comes in handy if you wanted to add people to the trust that could take possession of those, so on and so forth. Sit down with an attorney and get that trust drawn up. There's also sites like nfalawyers.com where you could do it digitally, and that may be a worthwhile move for you. In terms of legality, there are 8 states that ban suppressors: California, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. Those states have banned suppressors. The District of Columbia also bans suppressors. So you have the federal law, which is the NFA, National Firearms Act, in which these are regulated. And then you have state law. So make sure your state law is good. As much as I think that it should be different, there's the world in which we want there to be, and then there's the world in which we find ourselves currently. So if you're like me, 6x8 cells in orange just don't sound good. So make good decisions there. There's a number of different thoughts on suppressors for defensive use. Now, obviously, you saw the suppressor on a handgun. That's not really conducive for concealed carry. Are there options that might be? There's always going to be one-off options. Somebody's going to say, hey, this tiny gun, this tiny suppressor, this trigger guard only holster, it'll work. Do you? I'm not going to argue with that guy. But for most of us with normal handguns, that's just not feasible for carry. Now, for home defense, there's a good argument for it. Now, there are, interestingly enough, also arguments against it. John Lovell from Warrior Poet Society has said before that he doesn't want a suppressor on his home defense gun because he wants his neighbors to hear that something's going on. So if he and his wife are unable to get law enforcement on the phone, they can, because some bad stuff's going down. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying that I live too far away from my neighbors for that to be an issue. So unless we're outside rocking 308s and maybe 30-06s, they're probably not going to pick up on stuff going on inside the house. But even if I did live in a neighborhood, my personal thoughts are I have children. I'm responsible for their safety. Their safety extends further than just dealing with the possibility of someone being in the home and trying to do them harm. I do not want them walking across the stage at graduation wearing hearing aids. Now, there are things I can do to prevent that, and there's going to be things that are up to them. How they choose to damage their hearing is going to be on them. I just don't want to be a contributing factor in that. Will a suppressed 5.56 still damage hearing? Yes. I just know that it's less than without the suppressor. Suppressed 9mm inside is still pretty loud. We're at an outdoor range, thank goodness, because I hate shooting indoors, so I can't really show you how loud that is. It does make a significant difference, though. So does it completely make it hearing safe? No, not with centerfire calibers indoors. The exception might be things like subsonic 300 blackout, but they're still kind of noisy. So from a defensive context, the suppressor makes sense. Some folks bring up how a suppressor may impact a self-defense trial, things like that. There's no crystal ball for how a jury is going to look at some of those factors, but my advice and my takeaway as a non-attorney, not giving legal advice, would be that the why of the shooting is going to be vastly more important than the what you used, what was on your gun, things like that. Hopefully, if you ever found yourself in that position, you would also have an attorney that could articulate why you had a suppressor, if it even came up, and the benefits to you and your family that it may provide. So from a defensive use, it might make sense for you, it might not. Sound off in the comments with your thoughts on that. For hunting, again, check your state laws. For my state, it's perfectly legal. And having hunted this past season with a suppressor, it was kind of nice that when I took that shot, there was no ringing ears, anything like that. I was able to listen for where the deer went down, and he didn't go very far, fortunately. But I was able to still hear all of that. So hunting, especially if you're with your kids, I think it bears some thought. Now, is it worth spending the money and the process, going through the process to do it? Only you can answer that, but it does have some appeal for that. The last thing I want to touch on before we close is that suppressors can also be a great way to introduce kids to the shooting sports while taking some of the intimidating blast out of it. Now, as terms of recoil reduction, they do help a little bit. Ideally, you'll be starting your kids on something like a 22 that typically doesn't have that much recoil to begin with, but the suppressors can take a lot of that noise out of it. And it's just cool and fun and may help keep them excited. So there's a number of reasons why one may want a suppressor. So the last thing we'll get into, if you find yourself watching this video trying to get a aha or gotcha on me, and other suppressor owners, because by God they need to be cracked down on because so many people use them for crimes and Hollywood says hitmen use them and stuff. The percentage of suppressors that are legally obtained, gone through the whole process I talked about, Form 4, tax stamps, etc., that are used in crime is abysmally low. Seriously, you can look it up for yourself. Matter of fact, I'll drop those statistics down in the description so you can go look for yourself. It just doesn't happen in any sort of meaningful incidence rate. So there you go. Sometimes we see things like the United Healthcare CEO where a homemade suppressor was used. Well, that's not a law-abiding suppressor owner now, is it? He did not go through the process to get his suppressor that I went through to get mine, nor am I running around murdering people on the street. We're not going to get into whether or not that was justifiable under some moral code. I'm not the channel for that. But a crime was committed using a suppressor, but that suppressor wasn't lawfully obtained. While some people may try to tell you that if you don't have a suppressor, you're wrong, I'm not going to do that. I recognize full well the investment of not just money, but time and kind of the pain in the ass that they can be, right? We talked about needing the piston assembly to get them to run right on pistols. Some guns just don't play right with them. If you zero your rifle or your handgun, for that matter, you zero your optic without the suppressor and add the suppressor, or vice versa, it can change point of impacts. They can kind of be a pain in the ass to deal with. So I'm not going to tell you that you absolutely need one. My goal with this video was just to kind of dive into some of the things that go along with getting one and some things to think about. I've been happy with my purchases, but I have friends that picked up suppressors that have hated the ones they ended up with. So I cannot stress that enough. Spend the time. If you can try before you buy, that's awesome. If you happen to know somebody that has one of the ones you're looking at, you can ask them, or maybe even go shoot that can on your gun. That's fantastic. Otherwise, I would definitely get online, read what people think about them, read warranty work, because things do break, and this is a little bit more of a hassle than just going back to a store. It's got to go back to the manufacturer. You may need a new serial number. There's all sorts of stuff that goes on there. And yeah, just make sure the company's going to stand behind the product. Look for long-term reviews if you can. Find folks that have had them and used them, and if they've had issues, how is the company taking care of them? These are all smart buying practices anyway, and I do try to help out with that in some regards. There are things that I am knowledgeable on and feel comfortable giving advice on, and there are some things that I am not in a position to be giving advice on. I think it's pretty safe for me to give you the advice, though. Definitely spend some time researching what it is you want, what you want to do with it. For instance, if you've got a suppressor you're looking at because you want to take it hunting in all sorts of weather conditions, how well is that suppressor going to hold up? Even bullet types. A lot of people, including myself, like shooting cast bullets and things like 38 and 357. Well, with this being a sealed can, I needed to update a couple of my reloading recipes so that I ended up with a plated or jacketed bullet, but plated at a minimum to help reduce lead buildup inside this can, because this is welded and I can put it in the ultrasonic cleaner, but that's still, you know, I don't want it to get caked up too bad. Just things to think about. There's a lot that comes along with this other than looking cool on Instagram. I'm not trying to discourage you. I absolutely think it's incredibly neat addition to the firearms hobby if you're into it for that, or even from a more pragmatic standpoint. Just recognize there are additional things to consider. As far as the two suppressors that I've had out here today, the Omega 9K and the Griffin Armament Paladin 5, I'd get both of them again. I've been very happy with them. So if your use case matches my own, have at it. Now I will say, in terms of the Paladin 5 on 22s, I am going to be picking up a dedicated Rimfire can, just because I'd rather that stay assigned to 5.56 in my case, and then have something a little bit easier to user service than this one. And this one's not bad compared to the sealed units, obviously, but something a little lighter for the rimfires, a little bit easier to clean, designed specifically for that. Like I said, just because it may work for things beyond its initial scope does not mean it's going to work as well as something designed for that. So I do have plans to pick up a 30 caliber suppressor as well, which will probably take the place of the Omega 9K on the 300 Blackout, and also the Scar 17. And then I do want to get a rifle rated 45 caliber suppressor that I could use on my 4570 that I don't have yet, but I will get at some point. And all this stuff is down the road for me. I'm not loaded, so you see me getting stuff. A lot of it's been in the works for a couple of years. As of date of filming, those are my plans there. And ideally, I should be good, right? I said I'd be good after these, so we see how that's going. Anyways, drop your thoughts on suppressor ownership, or if you have questions about things that I may have missed in the video, please feel free to drop those in the comments and I'll answer them. If I can't answer them, I'll send you to somebody who can. A huge thank you to my channel members and Patreon supporters. You guys rock. I appreciate everything you do, helping to contribute to the channel and offset some of the cost of making these videos. If you're interested in doing that, there are links down in the description. The best non-financial way to support the channel is with your likes, comments, subscriptions, and shares. If you found this information useful, please consider leaving me a like. And if you'd like to see more firearms content, please consider subscribing. All right, folks, stay safe, try to get to the range, and I'll see you next time.